The herps are on the move. The annual migration of salamanders and frogs has begun, and today we'll learn how you can contribute to this literal rite of passage. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jolie Whitney. A herptile, or herp, is classified as a reptile or an amphibian. Although these two groups are very different, scientists put them in the very same class. Here in Vermont, you can find all these creepers and crawlers in the Vermont Amphibian and Reptile Atlas. My guest today is Jim Andrews. He's a herpetologist, and when he's not outside in the drizzling warm spring nights watching frogs and salamanders scamper about, he's a coordinator of Vermont's Reptile and Amphibian Atlas, better known as the Herp Atlas. It's one of the best citizen scientist efforts in Vermont, and Jim's been working on it since 1994. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Before we get started, can you just tell us what the Atlas is?
Yeah, well, physically, of course, the Atlas is a map or a group of maps that show the distribution of various reptiles and amphibians in Vermont. But the way it came about was that I'm part of a group called the Vermont Reptile and Amphibian Scientific Advisory Group to the Endangered Species Committee. And back in the 90s, when we were just getting going, we didn't feel that we had enough data to make really informed recommendations to the Endangered Species Committee on what species really needed protection. We didn't really know how many species we had, even the total number of species, let alone how abundant were they, what towns were they in, which ones were declining. So we really felt the need to gather more information, but there weren't enough of us to cover the state and to get all that information. So first we pooled our information, and then we gathered information from publications and museums, and then we just reached out to the public, and we produced our first physical copy and said, hey, see this? We need your help. And since 1994, we've collected over 120,000 records.
Wow.
You know, from people out there in the public, and often it's just somebody working at the woodpile, mowing the lawn, going for a hike. They see something, and of course at first it was iffy whether anybody had a camera on them. But as cell phones became more and more popular, people often had cell phones, probably most of the time. And if they ran into something under the woodpile and they said, what the heck is that? They could click a picture and send it to us. They didn't have to know what it was.
Sure.
We could figure it out.
Yeah.
And as long as they told us, you know, where they were, and actually some of that we can figure out now from the camera. Once they send us the picture, it has that right in the metadata, and we can see exactly where they were. Not all cameras, but many. And so gradually, you know, we've started filling up these maps, and to the point where, say, something like a really, really common species, this is this American toad, and so we have records now from the entire state. Mm-hmm. And so it's not real surprising to us that a species like that is found in every town in Vermont. But on the other hand, most people wouldn't realize that there's another toad out there. And if we look at our distribution of this other toad, it is very, very limited in Vermont, and we would love to get more records. Also, I wouldn't want to give people the idea that because we have good information on toads, we don't need new information. We do, because 1994, we've been doing this for 30 years now, and some of those records are 30 years old, and we want to know if those creatures are indeed still there. We expect they are, but we really would like to have a photo to prove it, and so we can feel confident, yeah, toads are still doing okay in Vermont.
Sure, trust but verify.
Yeah, right, exactly. So the Atlas is an effort, one, to collect information, but also to use that information to inform conservation decisions. And we also do a lot of outreach, which is just educational, let people know what's out there, and you know how they should handle it. Is it something worthy of a report? And in most cases, I'll say yes, it is definitely worthy of a report.
So if I'm stacking wood and I see an animal that I think might be worthy of reporting, is this something that I can check online if I don't have a handheld copy?
Yeah, and that was really helpful when we first set up a website, vtherpatlas.org. a lot of people would go to that. They would see something that they didn't recognize. Let's say a snake that wasn't a garter snake. You know, most people in Vermont see garter snakes. That's the common snake that we see most of the time. You see something a little bit different, you go, hey, let's check that out. And so once we had a web presence explaining natural history, identification, a lot of stuff. I don't know if you visited the website, but there's a lot of information. Our videos, YouTube station. But once they visited the website, it said, okay, you've got an eastern milk snake, please report it. And you can report it right here. Here's a web portal that allows you to just plug in your picture and say, hey, this is what I found.
An easy way to participate.
Sure.
And how is this effort funded?
Well, we kind of cobble it together. See that little loon there?
Oh, absolutely.
So that's showing you that we do get some funding from the Non-Game Wildlife Fund of Vermont Fish and Wildlife, and that's tremendously helpful. But we also get funding from an organization called the Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Cooperative, which, by the way, is a UVM cooperative that provides some funding for us. They also provide funding in addition to the survey work that we do and the citizen science that we do. We also have specific monitoring sites, such as on Mount Mansfield, where we have been monitoring with a much more rigid protocol for decades to see what's happening to populations over time with climate change, et cetera. So we get some funding from them. We do an annual fundraiser. The Lintelhack Foundation has been good for regular funding for a piece of what we do. Southern Lake Champlain Trust through the Vermont Community Foundation. So we get money wherever we can get money.
A variety of sources then.
Yeah, right.
And you already touched on how you use a lot of this information to work with endangered or threatened species at all.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the other uses for this data?
Well, obviously, right now there are a few processes going on. One, there's what's called Species of Greatest Conservation Need, SGCN, and every 10 years, the state has to review all their species and try to figure out which ones are the species of greatest conservation need, either high priority, medium priority, low priority. And that really directs federal funding. If you have high priority species of greatest conservation need, then that gives you access to some sources of federal funds that you would not normally have. And when I say gives you access, that comes through the state primarily, through Fish and Wildlife. So there's processes like that happen. There's public outreach. There's media like you guys. But yesterday I was doing a training for the Natural Resource Conservation Service. A month ago I was giving a presentation to the Vermont Association of Wetland Scientists. Next week is a presentation to the Vermont Land Trust.
You're a busy man.
Yeah. So we try to get that in. My point is, we try to get that information out there to people who are working on the land or to professionals who can use that information. So we use it that way, public education, government input in the Endangered Species Program. And anybody, let's say, well, I had a call yesterday. This guy was a little remote for most of our records, but he called me from Missouri.
Wow.
Even though it is the Vermont Reptile Amphibian Islands. But he had questions about the snake that he found in Missouri. I did my best to figure out, okay, is this snake supposed to be in Missouri, et cetera.
Yeah.
So providing information to anybody really that wants it. Yeah.
And speaking of, we would be remiss to not mention some of the things you've brought with you today. Can you do a little show and tell? Tell us what you've got here.
Sure. You want to start with snakes or you want to start with turtles?
Let's start with snakes.
Start with snakes. Okay. I bring this snake really because most of us Vermonters, and I will say that inclusively, anybody that's in Vermont now, when we run into a snake, we're used to seeing a snake 2 feet long or smaller, and it's usually a little yellow striped garter. Watch it. If you say garden, I will slap you. It's not garden. It's garter, which is kind of interesting because men used to have to use garters to hold their socks up because there was no elastic. So the socks would fall down. And so I assume what was going on was that some of their garters were striped and sometimes they came off.
Sure.
And so you see a snake that looks like a little striped snake, it looks like a garter. We got garter snakes. So most people are used to seeing things pretty small, except for those people who live within the range of this snake, which is the eastern rat snake. And like its name implies, it does like rats and mice. Loves eggs too.
Sure.
Chicken coops.
And is this one a little bit more regional than the rat snake?
Well, both of these two, yes, this one's more confined, but both of these two species are found in western Vermont in only a couple locations. The rat snake in two populations, one in western Rutland County and then one up in the Bristol-Moncton area. This snake, which is a timber rattlesnake, which of course draws a lot of attention because it is venomous. But if you're going to have a venomous snake, it's nice to have a very docile snake like this. But it is very localized. I mean, historically, there were quite a few more populations still in lowland sites, but Springfield, Vermont, across from Brattleboro, Vermont, in New Hampshire, there was a mountain that had some dens there. And like I said, western Rutland County. But some of those populations disappeared. There were bounties on rattlesnakes up through the 70s. But now most of the land that they're on is actually protected or public.
Sure.
And the landowners that live within the range have been contacted so that if a rattlesnake were to show up on their property, there's somebody they can call and they just move the rattlesnake back into the woods and get it off their property.
I'm afraid, sorry, we're out of time, but
really?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I know. I told you the fastest 13 minutes of your life, but thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
And if you'd like to see migration for yourself, or you'd like to learn more about herps in general, visit the Vermont Reptile Amphibian Atlas. The web address is on your screen. That wraps up our program for today. From the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX, I'm Jolie Whitney. Thank you for watching and have a good one.